All right, guys, my name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton-Sehon. I'm super excited to be talking to you with Swiftfire here tonight. We have Corey Goode, who is and has been a part of the secret space programs that some of you have heard me talk a little bit about. And we know that Trump rolled out the space programs that are like not a secret, but as many of you know, and maybe some of you don't know, that this has been going on for quite a while. And some of the things you may hear may be completely a surprise to you. Some of them may be like, oh, I kind of thought that and wondered. And then some of you may be like, no way, there's no way. But either way, whichever way you are, I love you and I value you where you are. And I just ask you to have an open heart and to have an open mind to maybe these possibilities. There's so many different things coming out right now. A lot of programming and things have just been kind of like collapsing. Different ideas and perceptions that maybe we've had are just like gone bye-bye, and we're having to reprogram and re-understand and really look and dig for truth. And I guess it's about 2015, end of 15, beginning of 16, I had went through a health crisis, and in the middle of that was starting to have a lot of memories and different things came up, and someone told me about Corey and a man named David Wilcock and pointed me to a show that they were doing. And I was just kind of like, okay. And after I got to the third, fourth, fifth episode, I was like, oh my God. And things just started popping for me. Memories were coming up. And the things that he was talking about, to be honest, for me, Corey, they were a little bit like out there, but it was also like relieving to hear some of the stuff that you were saying. And also when you were talking about some of these beings that were coming to you, you showed pictures of these beings, and I have had these similar, I don't think it's the same beings, but something along the same lines of one in particular, sometimes two, that have been coming to me for a long time, that I've actually been talking about from the stage and in my books and in my teachings for years, under the understanding that it was an angel. An angel does mean messenger. So that kind of like collapsed a lot of things for me. And I mean, I remember physically shaking and feeling like, oh my gosh, what's true and what isn't? And I contacted a friend of mine who I think you might be familiar with, who was part of some of these programs that did come out and didn't have the best time coming out. And I called him just for help and support to say like, okay, help me with some of these pictures, ideas, things that were coming in my sphere. And we've, been working with him, and I know Laura Eisenhower and some other people that have just really immensely helped me to be able to even get through some of this stuff. But thank you for being here, and I would love to hear some of what your background is, and talk a little bit about what you're doing right now in order to help all of us come up to that upgrade and to be in the best, sharpest place that we can be right now. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Now, I appreciate you appearing in my course, and I really appreciate what you've added. For those who don't know, and I'm sorry, I have a cough drop. I have a voice issue. I was born in 1970, and in the late 70s, early 80s, our government started doing a lot of programs, very secret, they were using children in these programs a lot. And this really got kickstarted after we had brought over all of the Nazi scientists, and they had pretty much infiltrated into all of our different programs, secret programs. They had brought over all of these different mind control experiments that were integrated into MK Ultra. Once they learned how to really manipulate and control the mind, MK Ultra broke off into all these other programs, to where they would take children, condition them, train them, program them in different ways to use them in what was actually a galactic war that was going on that we were just a very small part of. And what they would do is they would train children up until the age of about 17, and then they would bring them into a number of different programs. I happen to be brought into what we're calling the secret space program. And we've had technology for many decades to travel among the stars. And we developed technology, or we developed a program called Solar Warden. And this was during the 1980s, early 80s. And it was to protect our solar system from any ETs that would come in, steal our resources or anything else and leave. So they were basically being wardens for the solar system. I was brought into this program, and I was in that program for 20 years.
And you would call it a 20 and back. I think you versed that coin because you've had several 20 and backs. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I coined that term. But 20 and back, and this is where you lose people, usually. People can really wrap their minds now around space, how vast it is. But time, how time works is a whole different thing. When you travel through space, you're traveling through time. The faster you travel through space, the faster you're traveling through time. You're traveling from point to point instantaneously, you're jumping all around, you can jump all around in time. Once this ability was developed by us with the help of some ET races that wanted us to be their allies against this negative reptilian type race, they brought us a technology called a 20 and back. And that technology allows them to take a person out, take a person off the earth, out into secret programs for up to a 20-year period. And after that 20-year period, they give them the technology to age regress them through pharmaceutical means. And then they put them in a giant, looks like an MRI machine almost. And it zaps them back in time into the same machine 20 years earlier. Now they're 20 years regressed in age. They go through a process of being debriefed, and where they are blank slated or mind wiped, and then they're reinserted back into regular life. You know, people say, what is the point of this? And the point is to have a lot of assets working out in space, fighting this war without interrupting the natural development of the planet. There are cosmic laws. They're not allowed to come down and in giant spaceships and say, your planet's at risk, you know, come fight with us. It's cosmic laws. They can't do that kind of thing. So what they're doing is they're allying with our governments, and our governments are using these programs to use people as assets. And like I said, they start the training around, 6, 7 years old.
Yeah, and you're talking about cosmic law too, not to mention that we do know that President Eisenhower kind of gave permission or signed some sort of treaty for any of this to happen. Now, I'm not blaming him because I don't think that he really had a choice. It's, with all the different things that were going on at the time, I think he was forced into it. But, you're talking about the reptilian and there's these reptilian type, but then there's like good ones too, right? I mean, there's different ones, right?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. When people think of demons or the devil, they think of this reptile. And when they think of angels, they think of these, sometimes blonde, angelic beings, like sometimes are depicted out of the Bible. But for the consciousness of that day, they didn't understand other dimensions. They didn't understand outer space, other planets, other realms. So with their level of consciousness and their vernacular of the time, they could only describe, these beings as being from heaven and in service of God, angels. Well, people argue, a lot of people, Christians, I come from a Christian background, they're like, all all aliens are the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what we just need to understand is that we're talking about the same experience that our ancestors were having many thousands of years ago. We just have an updated vernacular and consciousness to explain what we're seeing and what's going on. So it's not a new idea that came in to take over, Christianity and the older, religions. It is kind of a higher consciousness understanding of what has been going on the entire time. And these beings do claim to be messengers and facilitators of the one infinite creator, the positive, higher density ones, which makes them angels. If they were to explain this to a person 1,000 years ago, they would go, "Oh, angel, okay." So what's your message?
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I've had one that I refer to as True. I don't know if she has a name that she goes by, but she's given me several messages over the years. She's told me when to take a job. She just showed up and said, this is the job. They've showed up in my living room with a bunch of books and libraries and records of things, and given me guidance on what to do as far as naturopathic things. They like things very natural and pure. And the message is always, the first real message that still causes me to literally shake and vibrate when I talk about it is, she looked at me when she was about to leave one of the first times that I have remembrance of it. And she said, "Tell them they're not truly living unless they're living true." And I knew that meant way more than, does my hair look okay or whatever. Like it meant your life. It meant how you treat the planet, how we are with the animals, how we are with each other, how we are with God and source. And, and just like you, I had a ministry, religious Jesus background programming. So I came out of that experience going, oh my gosh, two ginormous iridescent angel type beings were just in my living room telling me, not only about taking this job thing, but now there were records and records and records of people healed in these books. They were accounting basically of people who are being healed through all these natural modalities that were here on the planet that we could use. And they said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want to be a part of that." And they slammed the book, and then they said, "Tell them they're not truly living unless they're living true." And so that caused me to look into the science of being true. And I started looking into, oh my gosh, do you know when we're true, there are 1,500 chemicals that, when we lie, there's 1,500 chemicals that release out of our brain that cause us to have bad digestion, poor immunity, just a list of things that aren't good for us. And on the other side of that, when we are living true, there's a chemistry that makes us supersonic, where we can maybe have grace to do things that most people can't, or maybe have a job that most people can't, or whatever. But it matters, it literally matters who we're with, what we're partnering with, what we're eating, what we're drinking, what we're listening to, what we're watching, who we're hanging out with, who we're not hanging out with, our purpose, service, love, seeking truth all the time, no matter if it looks crazy or not, and just having that openness. But, for all these years, until I saw the picture that you had in that episode, and you posted that picture up, I was laying down when I saw it, but I actually felt like I lowered in the ground. I just felt like, oh my God, my whole life just changed, in this moment of all my programs just crashed and instantly.
Which picture?
You had some pictures of the different ETs, including the Anshar, I guess it was the Anshar. Mm-hmm. And mine, the one that comes to me, she came to me to tell me, "You're pregnant." She showed up on the end of my bed one time and she was like, "You're pregnant." And I must have looked scared, because she said, "No, it's okay. We're here to help you." And then she was gone. And I looked over at my husband and I said, "An angel was just here and told me that I'm pregnant." And he was like, "Well, I hope." Then I said, and he looked scared. And I said, "But they're here to help us." And he said, "Well, I hope so, because we weren't planning on being pregnant. But so, I mean, and then the next day, my daughter came home from school, and she actually had drawn a picture of a big angel with a stroller pushing a baby and a baby thing. And I was like, oh my God. So I went and tested, and I found out I was. And like this same child, who's now 19, when she was small, she would talk about the winged men who would come talk to her, to the point where my husband was just like, what the heck? You know, he's my ex-husband now, but I'm just saying he was so freaked out. They were in Walmart, and he rushed home with her 3-4 years old, and they were talking to her, and they were telling her stuff. The winged men that hers happened to be winged. Mine, I don't think were winged, or no, she didn't call them winged. I'm sorry. She called them the birdmen.
Yeah.
So that could be, you know, she talked about their bird kind of face or something. And, you know, what do you do with a 4-year-olds aren't going to lie to this. And she's had that like a long, long time too. So yeah. When I found you and some other people that kind of helped me walk through some of these things, you know, I've been sort of quiet about it. I'm slowly talking more about some of this stuff having to do with Montauk and the Looking Glass and time travel, and some of these memories of being in space. I mean, I've actually shared some of the things about being in space over the years, but in my mind, it was like an encounter or some kind of spiritual thing that happened to me. And it's like, I knew I was standing from the moon, and I was seeing Israel, and this stuff happened. And then I came back, and I told, you know, 5 people these things were going to happen, and then they happened. And I'm like, okay, now how am I doing this? Like, if I could figure out, like, if the Montauk had the chair and that was real and those things happened, then, and apparently happened in McCord, which is where we were also later. And that's where I met one of these people who are also part of the program, another young man. Well, he's not young now. We were young at the time. It's like, okay, so this happened with the chair, but like, how is it happening now without the chair? But, you know, he explained it to me, and maybe you understand better. It's like, we can all do it, but it's kind of like Dumbo with the feather. It's like, we think we need the feather, but we really don't need the feather. And so, you know, we could do it without the chair. I'd like to get to do it where I can have, you know, more of a will or control about it, instead of it just happening. And then I'm like gone 12 hours and literally come back, and I'm missing 12 hours of time. And I'm like, I don't know what happened. And people, you know, same thing with my friend. I mean, he'll be gone, you know, and space is missing. And, you know, it was 8 o'clock at night. Now it's 8 in the morning, and there's a light outside the window. And I got up to go look at the light, and I'm like, then the light's gone. But then I noticed, oh, it's also light. How is it light now? It was just night a minute ago. Like, it feels like a minute. And so I went to work the next day and told people what happened. And they were like, oh, you were in a trance. I've heard about this lady, Mariah Woodworth. She's a minister, and she goes in these trances all the time. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I was in a trance. But now I'm starting to understand that probably wasn't a trance. You know, just trying to wrap your mind around some of that stuff. Is how did you deal with, you know, your wife and your family and people who, you know, like, did they just know all this was happening, or did you have to?
No, I mean, there were weird things that happened around the house growing up. My parents were not, it was the 70s. They weren't real attentive, let's say, when I was younger. When my wife, there were weird things as when we've been married 27 years, and
Oh, wow.
It was, you know, 5 years ago that I came out with all of this. We would talk about things. I mean, we had UFO experiences together. I had, at night when I would dream, I would have nightmares, and I would be I'd be barking out orders as if I was in battle. And and it wouldn't make sense because, you know, it just didn't make sense from what she knew of me. So there were a lot of things like that went on. And then finally, about a little over 5 years ago, I had a pretty traumatic eye injury, detached retina. And when I went in to get surgery for that, I I ended up getting all of my memories back. I had pretty much remembered about 60 or 70% of 120 and back. And I had been on 2 additional ones that I had no memory of. And all of that came coming back. And there were a lot of really dark memories. And I was, suicidal, having a crazy time dealing with all of these memories. And then these ETs popped into our living room at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. And these little Oompa Loompa looking guys start running around the living room, picking up knickknacks, looking at them like they were just the most interesting thing they'd ever seen. And there was a military guy there, a US military guy in uniform, and he introduced himself. And he told me that they were to help. And at that point, Stacy comes walking into the room, sees what's going on. She throws her hands up and she says, "I'm not seeing this. This is not happening." And she turned around and walked out. And right after that, they transported me up to this ship where they did some sort of trauma relief method on me that took away all of the trauma. And the very next morning, I woke up, I had a spring in my step, the depression was gone, anxiety was gone. And I walked into the kitchen and my wife was Stacy, she said, "Corey," she said, "Did something happen last night?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "I've got some weird little kind of memories. I just know something really weird happened last night." And I said, "Yeah." And I explained what happened. And she was like, "Yeah." And that was like a major kind of a wake up for her. And then she kind of forgot about it, believe it or not.
Hmm.
And a while later, she read a Joe Dispenza book, and it ended up as Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused her to have a major awakening and this huge download of basically universal type of information. Her consciousness just went expanded. And
wow,
at that exact time is when I started sharing my information about the secret space programs. And if I had shared it 6 months before, she would have taken the kids, packed up the car, and driven, up to Missouri, where her family was. But
she was prepped.
The timing, it was major synchronicity. And ever since then, she's, been there with me through all of this. And it's been quite a ride. We've had people, try to destroy us for bringing this information out. A lot of times they won't kill you if you're bringing out classified information because it makes people more curious about what you're talking about. The best method is to discredit you and to make life so difficult that you climb under the rock you came out of. But because of, her strength and our combined strength, I've been able to kind of, stick it out. And she's actually, she's participating in my course quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. I'm loving to see you guys together. It's such a great partnership that you guys have. Something like, in 27 years, I mean, that's, some people, a lot of people aren't doing that anymore. So that's great too. It says a lot about you guys sticking it out and staying together through all that.
27 years, it's plenty of time to reveal every single thing about yourself to each other. And of course, there were some rocky times in those 27 years, and it was all, stress that was catalyst for us to learn from. And we've definitely learned from it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you could tell she's got a pure heart too. So you guys make a really good couple.
Thank you.
You had mentioned something about them slating and, but also having memories. I know from my experience, I have bits and pieces of puzzles and like absolutely zero evidence really. And that's some of the reason why I had been hesitant over, even when I was having memories at 10, I talked to my mom and tried to tell my parents that the moon was following me and different things are going on. And you know, they're just kind of like, oh, ha, ha. And then you kind of stop talking about it. And then, you know, taking you out of class. I remember being in line getting shots. I mean, I just, you know, different tests that they would put you through. And then, like I said, flying, you know, who's learning how to fly simulators in 7th grade, you know, to take you out of school to do that and stuff. Anyway, but I can say that my son-in-law is now in the service, and I'm gonna get emotional, but a few years back we went up to the base where some of this stuff took place, and I didn't think anything about it. I mean, I was just like excited actually to see him and my daughter and to see the base I grew up in, and I wanted to go see my house and show the kid, you know, show them where I used to live. And I went, the minute I got on the base, it was like I started having all these things happen. It was sort of like energetic keys that were just popping in my biofield to like go, oh, and that flash, oh, and this flash, oh, and that flash. And that kind of started a little bit more too. And then also your show, and you know, I had met Laura through another friend who was through NK Ultra stuff. And then when I would talk to them, it was like more and more and more. Just recently, with all this stuff coming out with Out of the Shadows and some of these other things, I think a lot of people are like really getting the magnitude of some things that maybe they weren't aware of that have been going on. And I know me myself even had some not so good memories about being underground and seeing children and chains and like dark things. And I'm still processing, but at the time when you're little and you have those memories, at least for me, I didn't have a grid for anything relatable on the planet or in my life to be able to say that this is happening, or I saw this, or this happened to me. And so you know, but what's interesting is I went to Mount Shasta. I felt really, really called to go to Mount Shasta for some reason for about 3 years for a bunch of different reasons. And I know that underground there, they got all the supercomputers and different space stuff down there and just whatever. And when I went over there, more things happened. I had this crazy encounter. And when I came home, I went and talked to my mom again for like one of the attempts that I've made to talk to her. And I said, Mom, you don't think it's weird that, you know, I was taken out of class and all these things and I was hand selected and la, 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 la. And she was like, well, you know, they told us that you were special and you were, you know, gifted, and that there was these gifted programs and things like that. And we thought that you wanted to do it. And I'm not saying that I didn't. I mean, when you don't really know if you have a choice when you're that little, like you just kind of just do what the grown-ups say. And not that it was like terrible all the time. That, I mean, I have some bad stuff and then some good stuff, kind of mixed, you know, it's hard to explain. But and then I said to her, I said, what about the underground stuff? And when I said that, she said, oh, you mean Montauk? And as soon as she said that, like, I had not studied, I had not looked into it, I had not, like, no real evidence. And I said, was Montauk underground? And she said, yeah. Well, sure enough, I said, were you there? Have you been underground there? And she was like, no, but I know it's underground. And I went and Googled and started looking up some stuff. And sure enough, there's all this stuff that's underground. I mean, we know that there's like 136 different camps or underground command centers in the States, and like what, 4,000 in the world now. And now all these dumps that they're supposedly blowing up, maybe, who knows if this is true or what they're doing, but this finally like gives me a grid to kind of feel not so crazy about some of these pictures, you know. And one of the things that I had just finally grabbed a hold of after being up at one of these bases is like, okay, so if this is my imagination and I just maybe saw a bad movie and had a bad thought, why are the thoughts exact every time? Why are they so detailed in the exact way they always are? They don't change. They're not like, you know, even a little bit changed. Like, how can all of these things not be a memory, and you know, instead of just an imagination that I've been trying to suppress and like, oh, don't think about that, that's terrible, or oh, that's really awesome, I don't want to think about that, but it's just really awesome, you know. But when you talk about the slating, like how does that work to remember some and not, and like with your memory process, you know, how was that, like did you just remember everything, or like what about other people that you've talked to?
It's different with everyone. Blank slating is very effective. If you want to think about blank slating, they used to do it with injections and then a combination of tones, and it was kind of a involved process. But think of Men in Black when they would hold up that neuralizer or whatever they called it, and it would flash, and they could program people to forget things. Very similar, like I said, more involved of a process. But intuitive empaths, which were just some of the assets used, you know, maybe a small percentage, intuitive empaths like myself, about 3 to 5% of us have the memories come back. And it's because these types of people are so in touch with their higher selves that if you think of it like cloud computing, I have all my memories backed up on this hard drive, but it's also backed up in the cloud. You know,
Oh, wow.
okay,
That's a
all of my
good,
memories. That's how you can have past life memories. All of those memories are in the cloud. And after they would go in and blank slate me or erase the hard drive, some sort of automatic redirection of the information to back up or restore the memories, you know, to my hard drive. But the memories wouldn't be contiguous. I would get a piece of a memory here and a piece of a memory there, and I would have that for weeks or months, and then another piece would fill in here and here, but nothing would make sense. It wouldn't touch, and then boom, that one memory
yes.
would pop in, that a whole cluster of these would come together, which would cause another cluster, and then you'd get a year, 2 years, and then it would just come. It is an exponential kind of thing to where I had 60 to 70% of all of those memories of the first 20 and back.
Do you have problems with your memory on Earth, like as a kid, like just regular? Because I find like I have almost no memories of being younger.
Yeah, I have very, very few. I have issues with memory when I'm younger, and also have issues with memory now.
Dang, yeah.
It's just kind of
Side effect.
Side effect, yeah, of not only going through all of these 20 and backs and all of these, you know, and also if they watch you, and if you get to a point to where they like, uh-oh, he's starting to recall, he's having recall, they'll grab you and blank slate you again. So people get blank slated like a bunch of times, and it's not good for your neurology at all. And also the super high technology that we were around constantly, enveloped in these high electromagnetic fields. There were all this weird stuff, you know. It does really bad things to your neurology. And a lot of people that were in the programs, they develop neurological issues, physical and otherwise, you know, and a lot of them develop temporal, I think they used to, temporal dementia. Yeah, temporal dementia.
Oh, wow.
So the older people get, it's pretty interesting. Just think about a lot of people that are in these programs. They have all of these amazing experiences. They get to meet ETs. They're in battles, or, you know, Star Wars kind of things. They're brought back to Earth, and they slowly get these memories back, but they'll develop something that's similar to Pick's disease or, you know, temporal dementia. And then they're cursed to lose all those memories and even forget who they are.
Wow. Well, I know some of my side stuff, especially as a kid, big time nosebleeds, to the point, I mean, like really bad nosebleeds. There was one point where I was having like a hearing issue and throat stuff going on real bad, and actually have a memory of them fixing that. I was supposed to have surgery that next day, and I shared a room with my sister. I was on the bottom bunk, and I remember just like praying and crying and being so worried about this surgery. Gosh, I probably was in like second grade, third grade or something like that. And thinking, what if they miss and hit my brain, or, you know, all these like things that a, you know, second grader would think or whatever. And, came and got me, fixed my ears, my throat, had slight bit of memory about it. And then went to the doctor the next day, and the surgical room we were supposed to go into wasn't ready. They were having some problems or something, and I could hear the kid in there screaming. He was supposed to get like shot or amnesia, and they were screaming, and I was freaking out. So my mom was like, can we just take her somewhere else until this room is ready or whatever? So they took me into one booth rooms and they're like, yeah, we'll just check your ears one more time or whatever. Perfectly. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. So they test me again. They test my throat. There's like no infection, nothing, because they were going to take my tonsils out, which, you know, I don't know if that's a big thing or not, but to me it was a big deal because I didn't have to have surgery, and they helped me with that. So it was like, you know, crazy stuff of like losing things and they bring it back to me, you know, lots of things like that. Have you heard of any kind of healing things like that?
Specifically healing what now? I'm sorry.
For me, I had, I guess I was going to get some kind of surgery on my ears and take my tonsils out at the same time while they were doing it. And I didn't have to have the surgery the next morning. But,
You know, I've heard of ETs, you know, healing people so that they don't go through surgical, you know, procedures and stuff. But, you know, that's about as close as I've heard.
but nothing personal where they've actually worked on you or done anything.
Well, no, I've had them come and work on me, work on some of my memory issues, working on some of the neurological issues that occurred. And strangely enough, I've had a knee issue that's really been bad most of my life. And they worked on that in the last couple of years. And now, you know, I don't know why they felt the need to do that, but I can run and walk and ride a bike, all the things I haven't been able to do for, you know, 30 years.
Well, and jumping, talking about healing, you know, one of the questions that I get from different people is like, okay, so if there are people on another planet or there's other beings or whatever, and like, where does God fit in this? Like they somehow think that God doesn't exist, or that it's ruining their idea of God because there are these things. And it's like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. There's still God. You know, Jesus was still here. I mean, it may be a little different than what we thought, but you know, it doesn't make everything else wrong, right? I mean, I know you come from a Christian.
It may be more wonderful than we thought, you know, who knows, you know.
Yes. So, well, I know that you have a lot going on, and if you don't mind, you guys, Liz had contacted me, one of your attorneys, about being a part of this Ascension program that you have. It's 12-week course with lots of great things going on with that, different speakers, and you are unpacking a lot of different information. And we did our recording for that a few weeks back. I would love for as many people possible to get in this program, because I mean, by the way, we are in quarantine, so what a better time to be a part of something like this. If we can't go anywhere anyway, let's tune into something that could cause an expansion instead of some of the things that, you know, are really mindless on television or movies. But please do tell us a little bit about your online program and how we can get in touch with you with that.
Yeah, it's called Accelerating Ascension, and you can find it at acceleratingascension.com. And first, let's define my definition of ascension, what is explained to me by ETs and in these programs when they studied consciousness, that what we call ascension is nothing more than an expansion of our consciousness. And our consciousness expands to a level to where we become more connected. And we call that fourth density. This course is talking about ways that we can remove things that prevent us from expanding our consciousness. And most of that has to do with karma from this life, past lives, trauma, lots of trauma from multiple lives, but this life's bad enough. So we're working through different ways of people being able to work on their traumas, to be able to move past what's happened to them in their lives so that they can become very productive in their life mission. It's a holistic approach. So it's mind, body, and spirit. So the mind, we're trying to get the mind, back into resonance, with dealing with traumas. And then we're covering the spiritual aspects about, how important it is to be a spiritual person and to be in contact with your higher self. And then the last component is body, which has to do with keeping yourself not only just healthy and in shape, but bringing in high vibe foods, water that's not contaminated, all the building blocks. And as a part of it, we have Shanti. She has a very popular restaurant in Bali. She's doing 8 weeks of a free vegan cooking course as an additional content. And of course, I interviewed you and about a dozen other experts, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert, I'm not a guru in all of these different areas. I'm just someone who happened to have, because of my being in the programs, I've had extraordinary access to not only these programs, but higher density extraterrestrial beings that have been trying to pass information on to the military and everyone else, but it's mostly spiritual, so they don't want to hear it. And it has to do with, before we can go out into outer space and become this Star Trek type civilization that we want to be, spiritually, we have to come into balance, or we will destroy ourselves with the technology. So their biggest mission has been for thousands of years with us to help us grow and expand our consciousness, become more loving beings, and to get over our traumas. And that's what my course is all about.
Well, I'm really excited about it. And I love that Stacy's working with you. And I love how open you are, not just about this, but the victim spirit, there's so many different subject topics that you're bringing in. It's not just like, hey, secret space program, blah, 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 but you're bringing in a lot for all of everybody to come up. I know for me too, I've been back and forth on even talking about some of this, and it's been interesting that actually even thinking about it and talking about it with my husband about, like, well, when you first talked to me and you're like, what all do you want to talk about? And to make sure that you're, feel secure about the things that you're going to talk about if you don't want to talk about those things. And afterwards, it was strange. I had multiple people who actually came to me after our interview, and we didn't say a lot about some of the things that have happened over time, but people were coming to me and asking, hey, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And usually it was about UFOs, ETs, the dumbs, blah, blah, blah. And I would just tell them straight up, and they would literally start crying and go, oh my gosh, I feel so much relief. This stuff has happened to me. One person thought they had like a chip in their head. Another person, their son was going through a lot of stuff and even on the verge of suicide because of some things going on that he's been trying to tell her for years, and she didn't believe him, and she was whatever. But because of our relationship, she was like, oh my God, I can't believe you are telling me this. You someone I've known for this long. And, will you talk to him? And I got off the phone after 3 people in a day after talking to you. And I just wept because I was like, oh my gosh, like, I guess this is the thing I'm going to have to say. I'm going to, and when I saw you on the program that you were on, I went to a meeting in Dallas with Laura and one of the insiders I won't mention, and we had some things we were doing over there, and I literally had the knowledge and awareness at that moment, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to talk about this. And this is a few years ago, and I was just not ready, mostly because I didn't have enough, emotionally I was a wreck, from every program in my understanding to that point at 40 something years old, completely being squashed. Everything I thought was true was all of a sudden not, or different. But also just, I wanted to be able to talk about it without absolutely crying the whole time, you know. But something about your program has like brought a lot of healing, you know, to me personally. And I think there are a lot more of us that have gone through things that maybe we weren't sure about. And I love that you're talking about PTSD, you know, a lot of, so many different topics that you're going into that I know are going to be really beneficial. So that's why I wanted to have you on more than anything, is because we're still at the beginning part of this, you know.
Yeah.
We still have lots of weeks to go. So you're not missing out, and everything is recorded. So even if you're a couple weeks just now getting in, you can easily go back and watch the replays and actually have the content for, you know, whenever at your leisure to sit down and go through the whole thing. So I'm going to, when I send this link out, I will make sure to put your website and a way to connect with you as far as getting online. Is there anything else that you would have, you know, you would like to share, or ways that we can connect with you to make sure we know everything that's coming up?
Yeah, well, you know, you mentioned Out of the Shadows. Over the last 2 years, we've had 2 huge hit documentaries. We had Above Majestic in 2018 and The Cosmic Secret last year, where we talk about the secret space program, we talk about ascension, we talk about this cyclic solar event that occurs that we're overdue for. A lot of very interesting stuff. ETs, ancient aliens. It's really exciting stuff. So please check those out. You can find Above Majestic on Hulu and on
Amazon Prime.
Yeah, I believe on YouTube also you can rent it.
Right.
And our latest one you can find all over the place, The Cosmic Secret. Also, if you want to see a lot of this information about my background, you can go to the Sphere Being Alliance YouTube channel. Tons of information there, or also spherebeingalliance.com. But the major site to go to right now is acceleratingascension.com for the course.
Awesome. Well, I'm very thankful for all of the free, you put out a lot of free stuff, and I know some people are like, what? Yeah, even with David Wilcock, who I know you're real good friends with, you guys put out so much stuff free generously, and then the one time you charge, people are like, why are you charging? But it's like, my goodness, like, it's not comparable if you went to an actual live conference, paid for airline tickets, paid for hotels, maybe you took off for work. You know, this you could do at your leisure, in your pajamas. It's a small amount of money with hours and hours and hours, way more than a conference that you would get. And you don't even have to go anywhere. You could do this on your phone or on an iPad or sitting in your car if you got to hide out, get away from your kids or whatever. So I think it's just a brilliant thing that you've done, is put all this on a virtual platform for people to do this however. But again, thank you for all that what you're doing on the planet and all your service. And if you guys want to catch up with me too, you can go to swiftfire.org. And I also have several other interviews coming up in the next week. We have Brooks Agnew, he's a physicist, and he's going to be talking a lot about time travel and quantum physics. I have Barbara Evans going to be on. We're going to talk about the basics of sacred geometry, which is a fun subject, the universal language, and several others. So do you hit the follow button or the subscribe, and make sure that you guys are keeping up with what different things that we have coming up, because just like Corey, I'm trying to get some information out to you guys so you have something to engage with besides kind of mindless whatever that's on the TV right now. And anyway, thank you. Give Stacy my love. and everyone, all your staff is so amazing. I appreciate them and their heart, their purity, their love. And that to me is the thing that I was drawn to more than anything, is just your pure heart and your humility. And I mean, when I was watching on the program, I've studied sacred body language. I've studied with, you know, FBI, like top level people. And as an empath or an intuitive, you kind of just know some things, but I also look at the physical of, you know, being able to tell like different tells, literally. And I kept watching and I'm like, either this guy is like completely believing so much in what's happening, or he's actually telling the truth. And then the more I watched, and even hearing, sometimes I can hear the vibration of how someone speaks, and I know, well, this is true or this isn't. And you have been very truthful and pure and humble through the whole process. And I love you guys' heart. I love y'all as a couple and a family. And you guys who are watching, continue to send prayers to these guys as they're out doing this stuff and bringing all this information to everybody. Pray for their kids, their marriage, their everything, all their journey coming up and what they're doing. And I just appreciate you. Thanks a lot for all you're doing, Corey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye. Perfect timing.